Do you know what I had a thought about actually? I was in a coffee shop the other day, and like one of the biggest trends we had in UK was ethically sourced. I was like, what the hell does that mean? It's ethically sourced
Hmm.
coffee. It's okay, it makes me feel good when I'm buying it. But what if you had a brand that was unethically sourced and was
That would be sick.
that would be crazy. And they said, look, dude, we're not paying our farmers. We're not. And and as a consequence of that, this is 20% cheaper. And it was like an unethical burger. Like, and it was like, you know, like exploitation at every stage of the supply chain. Complete exploitation, even down to the service.
That
Like,
paying your farmers, that's nerd work.
can you imagine that? We're like, but like if they owned it and said, look, yeah, we are a terrible company, and we acknowledge that we have no ethics, we have no scruples, but we
imagine if Google's thing was just do evil.
do evil things. Oh, what if it was like, we would love to get richer?
Well, honestly, their investment would be through the roof, because isn't that the whole point of companies, that nobody says that?
There is an honesty play there, right? Which is like, look, we don't wish you harm, but we're not bending over backwards to make your life better. Like if they just said that and they were like, look, realistically, priority 1 is that we make money. Priority 2 is that you get a great product, but we just want to make more money. Okay, so dude, you've seen Game of Thrones, right? You know Bronn, the sellsword. He became like, he was like,
absolutely.
Everything he does is motivated by self-interest. I caught a video when when Tyrion's got to fight the mountain, and he brings in Bronn. He's like, dude, I got to fight this like mountain. Can you help me out? He's like, dude, I already got gold. Like, when have you risked your life for me? And I was like, actually, he's an interesting character because everything he does is in his self-interest. And he's a sellsword, right? Whoever been given the biggest bag of gold, he'll bend the knee to and do what he wants to do. But yet he's loved. And I think that there's something about honesty and transparency and intentionality that people respect. Like, they will tolerate your selfishness if you are competent and honest. Because it's like, it's a negative quality, but you at least understand their motivations. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like, they're interested in making, and there's some weird level of psychological acceptance to that actually works. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's interesting because historically, the people that have prioritized, so sellsword stuff is very understandable. Money. 99.9% of the world understands being motivated by that. But then there are these supposed higher callings that people have, these like big ethical motivations and drives, like reduce world suffering, utilitarianism, and that sort of pragmatic view. Typically, the worst events in the world have occurred because people are motivated by some sort of higher ethical thing. Maybe you look at like mass genocides. It's because people are motivated by some supposed higher ethical calling. If you look at like, World War II, like the Nazis, they're motivated by some supposed higher ethical calling, whatever their twisted form of ethics were. Then, hey, we want to make a lot of money. And so I think you look at like the more recent stuff, FTX, for instance, this whole like altruistic, effective altruism thing, like the giving. If you look at like OpenAI, charitable, we're meant to like help people and be open and transparent. Like, that stuff sounds nice, and then it always eventually ends up being like the exact opposite of what it was supposedly for, right? And the people that end up being like the big ethical altruists, like effective altruists, almost always end up like having really messed up shit. And do you understand what I'm saying?
It is.
So I think like at some level, people are just going to distrust that sort of thing, that like selflessness. And even if people are really selfless, I actually would say like you're better off blanketing that supposed selflessness in like a desire to make money. And then people will probably like trust you more. So it's like, I'm here to make money, guys. And it's like, oh, okay, I like this guy. I can understand his motivations. Not, I'm here to cure world hunger. It's like, dokes mean.
It's like, interesting. I think it's because there's no transparency. They don't know if you know somebody's incentives, you can predict their behavior, largely. So if I don't know what you're motivated by, and it's not allegedly money, then I'm not saying we're all motivated by money, but I'm just like, as a base case, like if you say, look, I'm here to make money, this is what I'm going to do. It's like, I can predict that person, because as long as the deal makes sense, they're involved, right? But it's like, if people don't understand what your motivations and intentions are, here's one of the things I found. I know like we love psychology and negotiations. This is going to be really interesting. One, I don't want to call it a tactic, but one thing that I you can't be successful unless you have high degrees of ownership. Okay. You make a bad investment, you're saying, I should have done more research rather than the market screwed me over. The market's full. That's why I never. So it's like there's a strong correlation between degrees of ownership and success. What's really interesting is like I had a situation once where I signed a contract. I had an oversight on something. I thought a number was this, and it was actually something else. And we went through the whole process, and so we had this like discussion. And then I looked into it, and I'd made a mistake, right? And anyone who's read the book, How to Pitch Anything, it's by a book called by a guy named Oren Cass.
Oren Cass.
So freaking cool. Basically, every discussion is a collision of frames, right? And the person with the higher frame usually wins. And sometimes, if you want an effective outcome, what I found is that you can do the whole I'm correct, you're incorrect frame. But in order to do that, the other person has to admit that they're wrong, which often enough, people are not usually okay with doing that unless you reach a level of like enlightenment and, you get that being wrong is a good thing. But sometimes what I found is if you are just honest and say, look, I actually, if I sign that without reading it, I will own that. That's my mistake. I'll take that on board. That was my thing that I did. That's my mistake. My thought was ABC after the fact. So by actually owning something, what you're then appealing to is their good nature. Because what you're no longer saying is, hey, I'm right, you're wrong. Effectively what you're saying is, look, actually, you're completely correct. That was a mistake I made. I take full 100% ownership over that. But on reflection, in all honesty, it's not something I realized that was going on, or like that wasn't quite as I thought it was. Every time I've actually done that honestly in any kind of negotiation, it almost always ends up in the best outcome possible. And you'll find yourself butting heads with somebody because they have to, in order to win, they have to concede. They have to be wrong and you have to be right. But sometimes just saying radical ownership, and I found this myself, even when I've negotiated against people, a lot of times if they just said to me, honestly, Jack, you are correct. I actually made a mistake and I take full accountability for that. If you could meet in the middle, I'd really appreciate it, but I don't expect you to. You're like, that's a person you want to help because they bring ownership to it. Do you know what I'm saying, Nick? I don't know if I'm making sense with it or not. I'm not articulating it, but
No, you are. Think about it. Think how much cheaper it is in like a $10 million, $100 million negotiation to literally just say those words versus take some big loss. Yeah. If you, by saying those words, can get even like a 1% nudge, more favorable conditions in your direction, like you should probably do it. And that is just game theory talk. And that's not even any sort of like human desire for reciprocity. It's literally just like, hey, I really screwed up. Let me just level with you here. Anything we can do about it, like can we meet in X, Y, and Z? And it's like, oh yeah, I just made $1 million by doing that. 100%. What's the thing that's hurt by that?
Yeah.
My ego? Like, no, I just made $1 million, man. And I did it being true to myself.
It's so true.
So I employed the same approach. My girlfriend and I right now are looking for rentals. We're moving to a place called Kelowna. And basically there's a very small rental market down there. Most people that live in Kelowna, at least like the sorts of homes that we want, they'll buy, right? Nice big houses with lakeside vista views, whatever the hell. And we're looking at like a couple of apartment buildings. There's very little availability. And because of just the way that it's like kind of a vacation place to go to in the summer by the lake, like most of them are only doing short-term rentals for like a 2 or 3 month period by like, June, July, that sort of thing. And so they don't want to like allow us to basically move in at the date that we want. Like I was going back and forth with a bunch of these people and I was just like, hey, like, can we do whatever? And then they're like, oh, well, like we actually do short-term rentals. It's going to cost $10,000 a month for X, Y, and Z. I'm like, man, I'm going to pay $10,000 a month. That's insanity. Are you kidding me? I could, but I don't want to do that. And then I realized like, wait a second, why don't I just be honest with these people? And then, using my girlfriend's account because she's a pretty girl and I'm not, hey, can I just level with you here? And just like immediately everybody's like, you know what? I like that. Like we might be able to make something happen. Crazy. And it's like,
it's nice. It's so nice. True. It's the honesty frame. Not that we would use manipulative, but it's like, it is true. Genuinely being honest works.
Yeah. Like I want to move in on X date. I understand that like you're not open or amenable to that. Here are all my cards. You can see them, here's my poker hand. Just like here.
Yeah. I guess it's like,
I want to make this work.
I guess it's also like the transparency play that there's a trust play as well, that you've kind of laid bare your position and just been honest, and you've presented vulnerability when you didn't need to.
Yeah, I mean, like I think a landlord style situation, they probably really like that as well because they're like, okay, like the person that I'm going to have moving in here is probably trustworthy. They're not kind of slimy. They're literally just like giving me all their cards. There's a way to do that gracefully. You know, one of my favorite stories is called Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality, and it was written basically as like a fanfic of the whole Harry Potter series, dude. It's wild.
Oh, really?
It's
Damn,
like
okay.
10,000 words. It's like insanely long. And it's written by this guy, Elijah Yudkowsky, who's actually like one of the foremost guys behind the Stop the Development of AI movement, which is interesting. But I was reading this stuff way before, well, I mean, he's been talking about it for 20 years, but I'm reading this stuff way before like a lot of this stuff came to light. And then in it, there's this like very informative, instructive scene. So Harry Potter in this book is like a genius, basically, and he's really intelligent. He's not like the dumb Harry Potter you see dawdling around on the movies. He's like very smart, and he applies rationality to everything. Because he's like very intelligent, he can always find some sort of rational way to win. And then he's in some lesson with this like professor who's kind of way smarter than him. And the professor makes the point that like, Harry, like sometimes in order to win, you must lose. And Harry's like, well, that doesn't make any rational sense. Actually, blah, blah, blah. He starts debating with him. And then the professor, who's just like 3 heads taller than Harry, and he's a big man, just beats the shit out of Harry. Then Harry can't do anything. He can't do anything, you know? And he's just like, okay, like, do you want me to stop? Then you have to yield. You have to like accept that I'm bigger and stronger than you. And Harry's like, no, you know, you're just unfairly doing whatever. And he's like trying to win every single engagement and argument, like he's been doing the entire story. And it's wild because up until this point in time, you've really been like, Harry's the best. You know, he's rational and he's like applying logic, and that's how you're going to win. But the professor makes the point that like your biggest issue is you can't lose. You need to learn how to lose. If you can't lose and concede, then you'll never be able to win. You'll win in like micro situations, but not like the macro ones. So just talking about negotiating more generally, like how to get what you want, like you really do have to be able to lose. And at the end of the day, what is lost aside from just like a little speck on your ego? It doesn't actually matter. If you don't have a big attachment to your ego to begin with, why do you care?
I couldn't agree more with that. And actually, it's also what is the game you're playing? Because you can have 2 people in negotiation playing 2 completely different games. You're trying to nickel and dime for $200. They're trying to think about the long-term relationship. So you could win, but win the wrong game. And at the expense of that, lose the bigger game that you didn't even know that you were playing in the first place. So you got to think about your potentiality with that. I must have, when you said that Harry Potter book, I'm like, I don't remember that one on the bookshelf, Nick. Might have to try and dig that one out a little bit.
Professor Quirrell literally just starts beating the
I know, but
it's
fascinating. They should make that into an actual part of it. But there is just something about this brutal honesty. It says, look, I want to sell the shit out of you. I would love to have you as a client and make a lot of money from you. But to do that, I have to add a lot of value. And to do that, it's like there's just something about that rawness. It's like, you know, I mean, there was a cold calling strategy. We said, hey, this is a total cold call. I'm absolutely trying to sell you something. It's like, it's such a pattern interrupt that it's crazy. And we see this a lot with like cold emails, don't we, bro, now that like, weirdly enough, like the meta is non-formatted stuff. Like I actually sent out a cold email recently that had everything, had no lines in it. It was basically 4 lines of just straight text. And it got response within like 6 hours. It was crazy. So it's funny how that sort of stuff changes, but it's a good one. But if I had to tell you the main thing about the Oren Calf book is that you've got to think strategically on this stuff. It's essentially the idea is like, look, I have a series of cards. Like if you think of everything as a game, it's like you have to decide of all the moves I have, which those moves is most likely to end up in my desired outcome. That was essentially the whole premise of Game of Thrones. You know, it was a cesspit of snakes and deception, and they're all playing their own game, but effectively they're trying to reach an outcome. And they played it in sequence. And obviously, the more you play, the better you get at like second, third, and fourth order effects. But it gets more difficult to predict. And that was a whole drawback of the liars, because your lies require other lies to support the existing lies. And you build this spider's web network of lies, and eventually you get caught out by it. So it is so cool. I was actually thinking about rewatching Game of Thrones, but I don't know. I may need to give it a few more years before I jump back into it, but I've been watching it through YouTube a little
80 hours. Yeah, nothing like a good 80-hour investment. Dude, did I tell you my Game of Thrones story? Last thing, and then
Dude, no, tell me, man. What was it?
Dude, I had never watched Game of Thrones ever. And everybody was like, dude, you gotta watch Game of Thrones. This is crazy. And this is like back when I was still pretty poor at the time. So I was living with my mom and dad right after I had like some tough business stuff happen. Anyway, it was very embarrassing, but I was living with them, and then they took a trip somewhere for like a week, and then I was like, oh, you know, like I'll house sit, and they were like, well, you better goddamn house sit because you're not paying any goddamn rent. Like get the, you know, right before they kicked me out, basically. And anyway, so I'm like, you know what? I got some time here. Nobody's sitting around judging me for not like making money. why don't I watch this Game of Thrones thing? So, dude, I had a couch laid out and then like my TV on the other end. And I was like, I don't know, 8 p.m. or something. And I like clicked on the first episode of Game of Thrones. So I stayed up until like 4 a.m. that night. I made it through the whole season. And then I fell asleep for 4 hours. And then as I woke up, I had my fucking remote control in my hand. And I was like, and then I pressed it. Dude, I watched the entire Game of Thrones, the entirety of it up until like season 7 in like 3 days or something.
3 days.
I basically didn't eat. I barely slept.
Shit.
I was just like, dude, Game of Thrones for me was like a transcendental experience because it wasn't over the course of years like most other people watch it. I was just like, I was there.
You got hooked in.
like
you were like
everybody.
Damn.
I was in the universe, man. Dude, I like in those little periods of like dreamless slumber, but dreamless. I was like in the Game of Thrones world. I had Varys the eunuch, and I was like, I don't know. It was crazy.
That might be a world record, bro.
Yeah, I mean, like it was like basically the entire length. I mean, maybe it was like 80 hours. I don't know, but it was like the entire length of it, plus like probably 8 or 9 hours for the 3 days of sleeping or not sleeping that I did or didn't do.
That might be the best way to enjoy it. Is have the best 3 days of your life and just watch all of it in one go.
Yeah, it was. That was back when I loved binging everything. But
well, I think that's part of your personality, bro. You're like all in on things. It's like you see it, and you're like, I'm gonna complete it. Like one of those right now is something called Invincible. Don't know if you've seen that or not, but it's on Amazon Prime. It's like so good. And I wouldn't normally like it as a cartoon, but like you watch it, you're like, okay, I'm like freaking hooked on this stuff. It's so freaking decent. We spoke about The Boys before. That's a huge one that's coming out, final season. That is one last sort of, I know it's like the 8th segue of the initial segue we made, but there's a reluctance to let things end. So if something's profitable and it has a storyline and it ends at a certain point in the season, because it's so profitable, they demand further seasons. But it's like the whole arc is ending at this point. I mean, they bring back more seasons and then the quality ends up dipping down, which is why in so many series now, it's like, I'll only watch up to season X because that's when it lost its soul. But I think so. It's cool. There's a couple of things now, like The Boys, for example, where they're killing it at the end of season 5. It's got a definitive end. And I think there's something to that. You almost want to go out before the peak. Do you know what I mean? You don't want to like have that last, the go out where they just want 30 minutes more. That's the best time to leave. When they could just have 30 minutes more, then you leave ahead of the time. So I think that's like the meta, the absolute meta.